This means objectivity, as usually imagined, is an illusion. Scientists aren't neutral observers. They are shaped by language, expectations, and history. What counts as fact depends on the ruling framework. Kuhn's insight discredits science, but humanizes it, reminding us that knowledge is powerful, yet always interpretive and evolving. There is no timeless, final truth, only an ongoing struggle for deeper understanding. Oswald Spengler, in The Decline of the West, painted an unsettling picture at a time when Western optimism was faltering. While Enlightenment thinkers saw history as progress, Spengler likened civilizations to organisms. They're born, grow, peak, and eventually decline. To him, Western civilization has already passed its zenith. What lies ahead is not progress, but exhaustion, mechanical living, cultural decay, spiritual erosion. Technology may advance, but wisdom does not automatically follow. History, he warned, is cyclical, not a ladder upward. It's a bleak vision, but not without purpose. It urges humility, reminding us that assuming we've figured it all out can blind us to signs of decay. Spengler's haunting question still lingers. What if progress is only a polished form of decline? Arthur Schopenhauer and Friedrich Nietzsche both sensed Europe's decay. For Schopenhauer, civilization was a frantic escape from suffering, but the more it grew, the sharper suffering became. Nietzsche, meanwhile, saw society weakened by herd morality and denial of life, a taming of instincts that left people domesticated and empty. Modern civilization, in abandoning tragedy, passion, and creativity, produced obedience instead of greatness. Both thinkers saw technology masking a deeper void. Humanity chased comfort over strength, ease over transcendence. For them, the choice was stark. Either rediscover our inner creative force or sink into a hollow culture of consumption. Decline, then, is not the end, but a sign that something new must be born if we dare to face collapse and move through it. Nietzsche even challenged compassion itself. For him, pity was not pure altruism, but often disguised selfishness, a way to feel superior, to nourish ego. Compassion, he warned, can glorify weakness, reinforce victimhood, and make suffering central to life. A culture that elevates pity above strength loses its will to grow, to fight, to overcome. Those who pity may not always help, they may infantilize. Nietzsche's point wasn't to endorse cruelty, but to remind us, even noble feelings can become traps for Nietzsche. The role of the savior is not about easing another's suffering, but about awakening in them the strength to rise above it. True greatness, he suggests, lies not in pity, but in the power to inspire creation and resilience. Compassion, when genuine and active, can be transformative, but when it becomes performance or moral display, it is only a mask. Nietzsche urges us to stop glorifying people's pain and instead celebrate their capacity to overcome it. Both Buddha and Schopenhauer, though emerging from different traditions, agree on one central truth. Suffering sits at the very heart of human existence. Birth, aging, loss, unmet desires, and death, these are not exceptions, but the very fabric of life. Buddha called this dukkha, the pervasive unease woven into all conditioned experience. Its root, he taught, lies in craving our, clinging to impermanence. Liberation comes only through letting go, practicing mindfulness, and dissolving the ego. Schopenhauer, however, described life as driven by a blind, endless striving, he named the will. Even when one desire is met, new ones arise, and so existence oscillates between pain and boredom. His solution: deny the will, silence its impulses, and find calm in detachment. Neither figure preaches despair, rather both offer clarity. Suffering is unavoidable, but how we meet it determines whether we live wisely. Schopenhauer overturned the traditional view of reality. To him, the world wasn't grounded in logic or matter, but in an irrational, ceaseless, willing, unconscious force, pulsing through all living things. What we perceive as the visible world is only surface. Beneath it churns this relentless will. Our bodies are its expressions, our suffering the result of its endless hunger. To desire, then, is to suffer. Dark as it sounds, this vision carries depth. Recognizing the will as the engine of existence allows us to glimpse freedom not by chasing after it, but by quieting it. Through art, beauty, compassion, and self-denial, we can briefly escape its grip. Thus, for Schopenhauer, peace comes not through control or conquest, but through surrender. The true hero is not the one who masters the world, but the one who learns to stop needing it. For Thomas Metzinger, a philosopher of mind and neuroscience, consciousness is no divine gift, nor immaterial solid, is an evolutionary accident, a survival mechanism that happened to arise, but it has no ultimate purpose. What we call the self, he argues, is simply a model generated by the brain construction woven from memory, perception, and action. Consciousness is a simulation, and the shocking twist is this: there is no solid self behind it. The I we believe in is a useful fiction produced by unconscious processes. This shatters the idea of an essential self and raises an unsettling question. If no one is truly there, then who is reading these words? For Metzinger, this isn't despair but liberation. Understanding ourselves as self-modeling systems lets us live with greater honesty, less attachment, and deeper clarity. Consciousness may be an accident, but it can also be a path toward living. With awareness, most people assume they possess free will, that they steer their choices. But philosophers like Spinoza and Sam Harris dismantle this belief. They argue that every action stems from prior causes, as are biology, upbringing, environment, and history. Spinoza said it plainly: humans think they are free because they are ignorant of the chains that bind them. Harris, drawing on neuroscience, shows that decisions arise in the brain before we are conscious of making them. Free will, then, is only a feeling, not a fact. This reshapes how we think about blame, guilt, and punishment. If no one truly chooses who they are, how fair is judgment? The answer isn't to abandon responsibility, but to redefine it with compassion, prevention, and deeper understanding. Rejecting free will isn't fatalism. It's an opportunity to act with more awareness, free of illusions about blame. For George Berkeley, to be is to be perceived. Reality has no independent existence outside the mind. The world of objects, trees, stones, rivers, exists only so long as someone perceives it. If no one looks at a tree, it doesn't vanish, because God, the eternal Spirit, perceives all things and holds them in being. Berkeley's radical idealism doesn't deny reality, redefines it. There is no hidden substance behind appearances. Appearances are the substance. Though strange at first, his philosophy is powerful. It unsettles the assumption of an objective external world and draws us toward the idea that reality is inseparable from perception. His insights foreshadow modern debates on consciousness, virtual reality, and how minds construct worlds. David Hume challenged one of philosophy's oldest certainties, the principle that everything must have a cause, as in the universe itself. For Hume, this isn't a logical necessity, but merely a habit of thought. We see patterns, expect them to repeat, and assume causation, but that proves nothing. When we extend this logic to the universe as a whole, we misuse it. Cause and effect apply within time and change, but the universe, being totality itself, doesn't fit that frame. Asking what caused the universe, Hume argued, is like asking what lies north of the North Poles, the wrong kind of question. He also noted we never actually perceive causation. We see only one event followed by another and assume a connection. By rejecting the need for a cosmic cause, Hume unsettles traditional cosmological arguments and invites humility. Perhaps the universe simply is, and its lack of deeper explanation is not a flaw but the profound mystery of existence itself. Logical positivism, a 20th century movement, dealt a sharp blow to metaphysics. Thinkers like Rudolf Carnap and A.J. Ayer claimed that statements such as God exists, the soul is immortal, or even being is are meaningless not because they are false, but because they cannot be verified. According to them, a statement has meaning only if it can be logically proven or empirically tested. Anything else is empty noise, or, as Ayer put it, linguistic confusion. The philosopher's task, then, was not to speculate about invisible realities, but to clarify language, cut through illusions, and align thought with science. This stance reshaped philosophy for decades, pushing metaphysics to the margins. Though positivism eventually softened, its challenge remains alive. Meaningful thinking demands rigor, clarity, and sometimes the humility to admit when we simply don't know. For Freud, religion wasn't primarily a system of belief, but a psychological coping mechanism. In The Future of an Illusion, he described it as a comforting fantasy born from humanity's fear of chaos and mortality. God, in this view, is a projection of the Father, figure protective, powerful, and punishing. Religious beliefs provide order, meaning, and hope, but they do so by shielding us from the harshness of reality and the inevitability of death. Religion, Freud argued, is less a divine truth and more a shared illusion, not insanity, but wishful thinking disguised as reality. He doesn't sneer at believers. In fact, he recognizes the emotional comfort and social cohesion faith provides. But for him, true maturity means daring to live without illusions, facing a universe without guaranteed meaning. Science, though imperfect, is for Freud a more honest path in dealing with uncertainty. Letting go of religion wouldn't strip life of purpose. He believed would clear the ground for a more grounded humanism built on self-awareness and solidarity. His critique isn't about mocking spirituality. It's about resisting the temptation to hide behind comforting falsehoods. Camus and Schopenhauer, despite their vastly different voices, meet at the same conclusion. Suffering is inseparable from life, and it carries no hidden meaning. It isn't punishment, nor a divine trial, nor a road to redemption. It simply is. Trying to explain it away, they argue, is often just a refusal to face reality. For Schopenhauer, suffering is the stamp of the will that blind, restless force that drives desire and ensures we are never fully satisfied. To live is to want, and to want is to suffer. Camus instead calls attention to the absurd, a world that offers no answers, even as we desperately seek them. The true mistake, for him, is in trying to force suffering into a narrative. Both philosophers suggest maturity lies not in giving suffering a purpose, but in meeting it with clear eyes. Schopenhauer counsels renouncing the will, Camus calls for rebellion, choosing to live fully despite the absurd. Suffering may lack meaning, but that very lack pushes us to create our own, not as a cure, but as an act of freedom. Moral relativism questions the belief in one universal code of ethics, valid for all people everywhere. Instead, it claims values are shaped by societies, their histories, languages, and cultures. What's seen as right in one community may be judged wrong in another, and no single culture holds ultimate authority. That doesn't mean anything goes. Relativism isn't nihilism. Rather, it insists that moral judgments only make sense in context. To judge another culture by our own standards is often narrow and unjust. This perspective calls for tolerance and empathy. Yet it also raises hard questions. How do we condemn practices like slavery or racism if values are relative? The challenge of relativism is to build ethical principles that both respect diversity and stand firm against cruelty. At its best, it reframes ethics not as a rigid rulebook, but as a dialogue among ways of life, a recognition of the vast complexity of being human. Democracy is often celebrated as the pinnacle of liberty and equality, yet it has long drawn harsh critiques. In the Republic, Plato saw democracy as rule by an uninformed crowd, easily swayed by demagogues, where the hunger for freedom can decay into chaos or even tyranny disguised as choice. Centuries later, Noam Chomsky leveled a similar charge, pointing to modern democracies dominated by elites, corporate interests, and media manipulation. People vote, yes, but usually within limits already set by those in power. For both Plato and Chomsky, the flaw isn't the idea of democracy, but its corrupted reality, shallow debate, distorted information, inequality, muting certain voices. When this happens, democracy becomes more theater than participation. True democracy, they argue, isn't mere voting, it's access to truth, the ability to think critically, and equal power to shape society. Without those, democracy becomes a stage play dressed in the language of freedom. Henry Bergson drew a vital line between two kinds of time, measurable clock time and lived time, what he called duration. Clock time is linear, segmented, external. Duration is fluid, subjective, internal. The way memories color the present, how moods stretch or compress moments, how anticipation bends our sense of the future. We never really experience time as ticking seconds. We feel it as the rhythm of consciousness. Science, Bergson argued, can calculate time, but never capture its felt texture. Philosophy should stay true to life's inner flow, not reduce it to numbers. This insight shaped psychology, phenomenology, and even physics. For Bergson, time is not just cosmic, it pulses through the soul, and to grasp it, we need intuition, not calculation. Freedom, we like to think, is a gift, but thinkers like Sartre and Dostoevsky remind us it comes with a crushing weight. Sartre claims we are radically free. No God, no destiny, no excuses. Every moment demands a choice, and in that freedom lies our burden. It provokes anxiety because there's no one else to blame. Each decision or refusal to decide rests on us alone. Dostoevsky, in The Brothers Karamazov, explores how unbearable this can be. Offered absolute freedom, people often choose safety instead, surrendering to authority, miracle, or faith rather than endure the terror of independence. Yet true freedom means refusing escape. It means owning your life wholly, even when it hurts. It is a burden, yes, but within it lies the power to create yourself. Emil Durkheim, the father of sociology, redefined crime not as individual weakness, but as a social fact. Each society sets its own rules for what counts as crime, and strangely, crime plays a role. It challenges norms, sparks reform, reveals tensions. In this way, crime is not just pathology, but a sign of social evolution. Crucially, Durkheim insisted, crime often stems from inequality, exclusion, or injustice. A society that breeds poverty and alienation generates the very crimes it condemns. Punishment alone, without addressing root causes, only repeats the cycle. Crime is a mirror. Ignore what it shows, and nothing changes. Foucault and Kelsen, while different, converged on one insight. Law is less about justice than about power. Kelsen, with his pure theory of law, stripped morality from legality. A law is valid if it fits the system, not if it is just. Foucault pushed further, arguing law is an instrument of control, born from history, struggle, and domination. Justice, in this view, is not the source of law, but the story we tell about it. When law claims to reflect justice, Foucault asks, whose justice, and for whom? He shows how laws enforce norms, control bodies, and preserve inequality. Law, then, is never neutral. It is political at its core. To see this clearly is not cynicism, but a chance to rethink justice. Beyond legal codes, Machiavelli shattered the illusion that virtue alone changes the world. For him, virtue means not moral goodness, but effectiveness, cunning, the will to act. Without power, that virtue is useless, like a sword without a hand to wield it. Justice and good leadership demand strength. Without it, noble rulers are crushed by ruthless ones, and the people suffer. Machiavelli doesn't preach that ends always justify means, but he insists that power and strategy are indispensable. A ruler who is virtuous but weak fails not only himself, but everyone he leads. Dirty but necessary without it. Virtue remains trapped in theory and never touches reality. Machiavelli shows us that ethics and politics aren't natural enemies. Power is the link between them. The point isn't to abandon power, but to wield it wisely for the greater good. That requires more than innocence. It demands practical intelligence. For Roland Barthes, love isn't some timeless, universal emotion. It's a cultural invention. In A Lover's Discourse, he explains love as a language filled with signs, expectations, and emotional codes handed down to us. What feels natural is already shaped by history. We learn love through stories, from medieval romances to today's movies. Each era teaches its own version. So-called true love is often a performance built on scripts from literature, media, and social traditions. But this doesn't make love false. It makes it human. Seeing love as a construct doesn't ruin it, it liberates it. Art invites us to love more truthfully, not by repeating someone else's script, but by writing our own. Deleuze and Guattari shattered older ideas of desire. For them, desire isn't a sign of lack, as Freud and Lacan suggested. It's about creation, flow, and movement. Desire is endless, never finished, never settled. It doesn't chase one final object. It generates new connections, processes, and possibilities. Every time we think a desire is fulfilled, it shifts elsewhere. It works like a machine, not one that consumes, but one that produces reality. This challenges the illusion that happiness comes from finally getting what we want. Desire has no conclusion, and it isn't meant to. It is the vital force of the unconscious, the engine of creation, politics, and art. To desire is not to seek completion, but to embrace life's unfinished nature. In that acceptance, we don't lose, we gain strength. For him, sexuality is shaped by discourse, institutions, and practices that teach us how to feel and even who we are. Sexuality isn't only repressed, it's managed, categorized, and controlled. What's normal or deviant doesn't come from biology, but from power systems that govern bodies. Religion, medicine, and law have all defined acceptable. Sex, power doesn't just forbid, creates. It gives us labels, forces confessions, and invents identities. The very idea of a sexual self is a modern product of discipline. That's why sexuality is political, not because it should be, but because it always has been, in civilization and its discontents. Freud argues that culture exists only because we repress our primal instincts. Living together means restraining desires, especially sexual and aggressive ones. Civilization depends on repression, but this also breeds unease. Adorno, combining Marx and Freud, pushes further. He sees culture not as liberation, but as control. The culture industry turns people passive, addicted to entertainment that numbs critical thought. Both thinkers reveal the double nature of culture. It educates, but it also normalizes. It creates, but also restrains. True liberation means recognizing culture as conflict, not harmony. Only then can we consciously build new ways of living. In Dialectic of Enlightenment, Adorno and Horkheimer expose the dark side of modern reason. Once meant to free us from superstition, reason became a tool of domination. What should have been critique turned into calculation. Philosophy shrank into management. Rationality became obsessed with efficiency, productivity, and control, forgetting to ask why. The terrifying example is Nazism. Industrialized killing, cold logic without ethics, stripped of empathy. Reason became complicit in horror. The Frankfurt School didn't want to discard reason, but to rescue it, not just as logic, but as critique, as art, as an ethical force that asks not only how, but why. Hegel saw art as a way for spirit to show itself, a visible form of truth. But he believed art's role would fade as philosophy and religion went further in expressing consciousness. Art fulfills its mission and surpasses itself. That doesn't mean art dies, it transforms. It no longer claims to hold ultimate truth. Instead, modern art reflects fragmentation and uncertainty. By breaking itself apart, it mirrors truth in pieces. Its end is really its renewal. Art survives. but as a shattered mirror of spirit. Foucault also shows that modern power doesn't just repress it, fabricates controlled freedom. Instead of banning, it sets boundaries and lets us choose within them. We act freely, but inside systems shaped by institutions, norms, and statistics. Disciplinary society doesn't rely on chains. It works through habits, routines, and invisible expectations. We aren't forced, we've been trained. The trickiest trap is this: we feel autonomous, but only repeat what's expected. Work, consume, perform. Freedom becomes self-exploitation. Foucault doesn't reject freedom. He asks us to question what kind we actually have, and how to escape the invisible cages disguised as choice. Nietzsche had already doubted sacred truth. What seems universal often hides a will to power. To declare this is truth is often to silence others. Derrida goes further. Truth is inseparable from language, and language always excludes and omits. When truth claims neutrality, it quietly oppresses. The violence of truth isn't just in lies, it's in deciding meanings, erasing what doesn't fit. But this doesn't mean nothing matters. It means opening space for other voices, other truths. Truth should be questioned, not worshipped. Truth refuses critique. It becomes just another mask for power. If this content resonated with you, give this video a like. It helps reach others who are also searching for awareness. Share it with someone who needs this reminder. Sometimes a single idea can spark transformation. And of course, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss new reflections. Here, philosophy isn't decoration, it's a tool for awakening. Thank you for being here, for giving yourself this time, and for walking with us on this path of thought, courage, and discovery. Until next time.